Northern Ireland, Ulster-Scots, Norlin Airlann, is a part of the United Kingdom, situated in the northeast of the island of Ireland, that is variously described as a country, province, or region. Northern Ireland shares a border to the south and west with the Republic of Ireland. In 2021, its population was 1,903,100, making up about 27% of Ireland's population and about 3% of the UK's population. The Northern Ireland Assembly, established by the Northern Ireland Act 1998, holds responsibility for a range of devolved policy matters, while other areas are reserved for the UK government. Northern Ireland cooperates with the Republic of Ireland in several areas. Northern Ireland was created in 1921, when Ireland was partitioned by the Government of Ireland Act 1920, creating a devolved government for the 6 northeastern counties. As was intended, Northern Ireland had a unionist majority, who wanted to remain in the United Kingdom. They were generally the Protestant descendants of colonists from Britain. Meanwhile, the majority in Southern Ireland, and a significant minority in Northern Ireland, were Irish nationalists and Catholics who wanted a united independent Ireland. Today, the former generally see themselves as British and the latter generally see themselves as Irish, while a Northern Irish or Ulster identity is claimed by a significant minority from all backgrounds. The creation of Northern Ireland was accompanied by violence both in defence of and against partition. During the conflict of 1920–22, the capital Belfast saw major communal violence, mainly between Protestant Unionist and Catholic nationalist civilians. More than 500 were killed and more than 10,000 became refugees, mostly Catholics. For the next 50 years, Northern Ireland had an unbroken series of Unionist Party governments. There was informal mutual segregation by both communities, and the Unionist governments were accused of discrimination against the Irish nationalist and Catholic minority. In the late 1960s, a campaign to end discrimination against Catholics and nationalists was opposed by Loyalists, who saw it as a Republican front. This unrest sparked the Troubles, a 30-year conflict involving Republican and Loyalist paramilitaries and state forces, which claimed over 3,500 lives and injured 50,000 others. The 1998 Good Friday Agreement was a major step in the peace process, including paramilitary disarmament and security normalization. Although sectarianism and segregation remain major social problems, and sporadic violence has continued. The economy of Northern Ireland was the most industrialist in Ireland at the time of partition of Ireland, but declined, a decline exacerbated by the political and social turmoil of the Troubles. Its economy has grown significantly since the late 1990s. The initial growth came from the peace dividend and increased trade with the Republic of Ireland, continuing with a significant increase in tourism, investment, and business from around the world. Unemployment in Northern Ireland peaked at 17.2% in 1986, dropping to 6.1% for June–August 2014 and down by 1.2 percentage points over the year, similar to the UK figure of 6.2%. Cultural links between Northern Ireland, the rest of Ireland, and the rest of the UK are complex, with Northern Ireland sharing both the culture of Ireland and the culture of the United Kingdom. In many sports, the island of Ireland fields a single team, with the Northern Ireland national football team being an exception to this. Northern Ireland competes separately at the Commonwealth Games, and people from Northern Ireland may compete for either Great Britain or Ireland at the Olympic Games. History. The region that is now Northern Ireland was long inhabited by native Gaels who were Irish-speaking and predominantly Catholic. It was made up of several Gaelic kingdoms and territories and was part of the province of Ulster. In 1169, Ireland was invaded by a coalition of forces under the command of the English crown that quickly overran and occupied most of the island, beginning 800 years of foreign central authority. Attempts at resistance were swiftly crushed everywhere outside of Ulster. Unlike in the rest of the country, where Gaelic authority continued only in scattered, remote pockets, the major kingdoms of Ulster would mostly remain intact with English authority in the province contained to areas on the eastern coast closest to Great Britain. English power gradually eroded in the face of stubborn Irish resistance in the centuries that followed, eventually being reduced to only the city of Dublin and its suburbs. When Henry VIII launched the 16th-century Tudor reconquest of Ireland, Ulster once resisted most effectively. In the 9 Years' War, an alliance of Gaelic chieftains led by the two most powerful Ulster lords, Hugh Roe O'Donnell and the Earl of Tyrone, fought against the English government in Ireland. The Ulster-dominated alliance represented the First Irish United Front. Despite being able to cement an alliance with Spain and major victories early on, inevitable defeat was virtually guaranteed following England's victory at the Siege of Kinsale. In 1607, the rebellion's leaders fled to mainland Europe alongside much of Ulster's Gaelic nobility. Their lands were confiscated by the Crown and colonized with English-speaking Protestant settlers from Britain, in the plantation of Ulster. This led to the founding of many of Ulster's towns and created a lasting Ulster Protestant community with ties to Britain. The Irish Rebellion of 1641 began in Ulster. The rebels wanted an end to anti-Catholic discrimination, greater Irish self-governance, and to roll back the plantation. It developed into an ethnic conflict between Irish Catholics and British Protestant settlers and became part of the wider Wars of the Three Kingdoms, which ended with the English parliamentarian conquest. Further Protestant victories in the Williamite-Jacobite War solidified Anglican Protestant rule in the Kingdom of Ireland. The Williamite victories of the Siege of Derry and Battle of the Boyne are still celebrated by some Protestants in Northern Ireland. Many more Scots Protestants migrated to Ulster during the Scottish famine of the 1690s. Following the Williamite victory, and contrary to the Treaty of Limerick, a series of penal laws were passed by the Anglican Protestant ruling class in Ireland. The intention was to disadvantage Catholics and, to a lesser extent, Presbyterians. Some 250,000 Ulster Presbyterians emigrated to the British North American colonies between 1717 and 1775. It is estimated that there are more than 27 million Scotch-Irish Americans now living in the United States, along with many Scotch-Irish Canadians in Canada. In the context of institutional discrimination, the 18th century saw secret, militant societies develop in Ulster and act on sectarian tensions and violent attacks. This escalated at the end of the century, especially during the County Armagh disturbances, where the Protestant Pepo des Bois fought the Catholic defenders. This led to the founding of the Protestant Orange Order. The Irish Rebellion of 1798 was led by the United Irishmen, a cross-community Irish Republican group founded by Belfast Presbyterians, which sought Irish independence. Following this, the government of the Kingdom of Great Britain pushed for the two kingdoms to be merged, in an attempt to quell sectarianism, remove discriminatory laws, and prevent the spread of French-style republicanism. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland was formed in 1801 and governed from London. During the 19th century, legal reforms known as the Catholic Emancipation continued to remove discrimination against Catholics, and progressive programs enabled tenant farmers to buy land from landlords. Home Rule crisis. By the late 19th century, a large and disciplined cohort of Irish nationalist MPs at Westminster committed the Liberal Party to Irish Home Rule self-government for Ireland, within the United Kingdom. This was bitterly opposed by Irish Unionists, most of whom were Protestants, who feared an Irish devolved government dominated by Irish nationalists and Catholics. The Government of Ireland Bill 1886 and Government of Ireland Bill 1893 were defeated. However, Home Rule became a near certainty in 1912 after the Government of Ireland Act 1914 was introduced. The Liberal government was dependent on nationalist support, and the Parliament Act 1911 prevented the House of Lords from blocking the bill indefinitely. In response, Unionists vowed to prevent Irish Home Rule from Conservative and Unionist party leaders such as Bonner Law and Dublin-based barrister Edward Carson to militant working-class Unionists in Ireland. This sparked the Home Rule crisis. In September 1912, more than 500,000 Unionists signed the Ulster Covenant, pledging to oppose Home Rule by any means and to defy any Irish government. In 1914, Unionists smuggled thousands of rifles and rounds of ammunition from Imperial Germany for use by the Ulster Volunteers, a paramilitary organisation formed to oppose Home Rule. Irish nationalists had also formed a paramilitary organisation, the Irish Volunteers. It sought to ensure Home Rule was implemented, and it smuggled its own weapons into Ireland a few months after the Ulster Volunteers. Ireland seemed to be on the brink of civil war. Unionists were in a minority in Ireland as a whole, but a majority in the province of Ulster, especially the counties Antrim, Down, Armagh and Londonderry. Unionists argued that if Home Rule could not be stopped, then all or part of Ulster should be excluded from it. In May 1914, the UK government introduced an amending bill to allow for Ulster to be excluded from Home Rule. There was then debate over how much of Ulster should be excluded and for how long. Some Ulster Unionists were willing to tolerate the loss of some mainly Catholic areas of the province. The crisis was interrupted by the outbreak of the First World War in August 1914, and Ireland's involvement in it. The UK government abandoned the amending bill, and instead rushed through a new bill, the Suspensory Act 1914, suspending Home Rule for the duration of the war, with the exclusion of Ulster still to be decided. Partition of Ireland. By the end of the war, most Irish nationalists now wanted full independence rather than Home Rule. In September 1919, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George tasked a committee with planning another Home Rule bill. Headed by English Unionist politician Walter Long, it was known as the Long Committee. It decided that two devolved governments should be established, one for the 9 counties of Ulster and one for the rest of Ireland, together with a Council of Ireland for the encouragement of Irish unity. Most Ulster Unionists wanted the territory of the Ulster government to be reduced to 6 counties so that it would have a larger Protestant Unionist majority. They feared that the territory would not last if it included too many Catholics and Irish nationalists. The 6 counties of Antrim, Down, Armagh, Londonderry, Tyrone and Fermanagh comprised the maximum area Unionists believed they could dominate. The area that was to become Northern Ireland amounted to 6 of the 9 counties of Ulster, in spite of the fact that in the last All-Ireland election counties Fermanagh and Tyrone had Sinn Féin/Nationalist Party majorities. Events overtook the government. In the 1918 Irish general election, the pro-independence Sinn Féin party won the overwhelming majority of Irish seats. Sinn Féin's elected members boycotted the British Parliament and founded a separate Irish Parliament, declaring the independent Irish Republic covering the whole island. Many Irish Republicans blamed the British establishment for the sectarian divisions in Ireland, and believed that Ulster Unionist defiance would fade once British rule was ended. The British authorities outlawed the Dáil in September 1919, and a guerrilla conflict developed as the Irish Republican Army began attacking British forces. This became known as the Irish War of Independence. Meanwhile, the Government of Ireland Act 1920 passed through the British Parliament in 1920. It would divide Ireland into 2 self-governing UK territories, the 6 northeastern counties being ruled from Belfast, and the other 26 counties being ruled from Dublin. Both would have a shared Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, who would appoint both governments and a Council of Ireland, which the UK government intended to evolve into an All-Ireland Parliament. The Act received royal assent that December, becoming the Government of Ireland Act 1920. It came into force on May 3, 1921, partitioning Ireland and creating Northern Ireland. Elections to the Northern Parliament were held on May 24, in which Unionists won most seats. Its parliament first met on June 7 and formed its first devolved government, headed by Unionist Party leader James Craig. Republican and Nationalist members refused to attend. King George V addressed the ceremonial opening of the Northern Parliament on 22 June. During 1920–22, in what became Northern Ireland, partition was accompanied by violence in defence or opposition to the new settlement. See the Troubles in Northern Ireland. The IRA carried out attacks on British forces in the northeast but was less active than in the south of Ireland. Protestant loyalists attacked the Catholic community in reprisal for IRA actions. In the summer of 1920, sectarian violence erupted in Belfast and Derry, and there were mass burnings of Catholic property in Lisbon and Banbridge. Conflict continued intermittently for 2 years, mostly in Belfast, which saw savage and unprecedented communal violence between Protestant and Catholic civilians. There was rioting, gun battles, and bombings. Homes, businesses, and churches were attacked and people were expelled from workplaces and mixed neighborhoods. More than 500 were killed and more than 10,000 became refugees, most of them Catholics. The British Army was deployed and the Ulster Special Constabulary was formed to help the regular police. The USC was almost wholly Protestant and some of its members carried out reprisal attacks on Catholics. A truce between British forces and the IRA was established on July 11, 1921, ending the fighting in most of Ireland. However, communal violence continued in Belfast, and in 1922 the IRA launched a guerrilla offensive in border areas of Northern Ireland. The Anglo-Irish Treaty was signed between representatives of the UK government and the Irish Republic on December 6, 1921. This created the Irish Free State. Under the terms of the treaty, Northern Ireland would become part of the Free State unless the government opted out by presenting an address to the King, although in practice partition remained in place. As expected, the Parliament of Northern Ireland resolved on December 7, 1922 to exercise its right to opt out of the Free State by making an address to King George V. The text of the address was, "Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Senators and Commons of Northern Ireland in Parliament assembled, having learned of the passing of the Irish Free State Constitution Act 1922, being the Act of Parliament for the ratification of the Articles of Agreement for a treaty between Great Britain and Ireland, do, by this humble address, pray Your Majesty that the powers of the Parliament and Government of the Irish Free State shall no longer extend to Northern Ireland." Shortly afterwards, the Irish Boundary Commission was established to decide on the border between the Irish Free State and Northern Ireland. Owing to the outbreak of the Irish Civil War, the work of the Commission was delayed until 1925. The Free State government and Irish nationalists hoped for a large transfer of territory to the Free State, as many border areas had nationalist majorities, leaving the remaining Northern Ireland too small to be viable. However, the Commission's final report recommended only small transfers of territory, and in both directions. The Free State, Northern Ireland, and UK governments agreed to suppress the report and accept the status quo, while the UK government agreed that the Free State would no longer have to pay its share of the UK national debt. 1925–1965. Northern Ireland's border was drawn to give it a decisive Protestant majority. At the time of its creation, Northern Ireland's population was 2/3 Protestant and 1/3 Catholic. Most Protestants were Unionists/Loyalists who sought to maintain Northern Ireland as a part of the United Kingdom, while most Catholics were Irish nationalists/Republicans who sought an independent United Ireland. There was mutual self-imposed segregation in Northern Ireland between Protestants and Catholics, such as in education, housing, and often employment. For its first 50 years, Northern Ireland had an unbroken series of Unionist Party governments. Almost every minister of these governments were members of the Protestant Orange Order. Almost all judges and magistrates were Protestant, many of them closely associated with the Unionist Party. Northern Ireland's new police force was the Royal Ulster Constabulary, which succeeded the Royal Irish Constabulary. It too was almost wholly Protestant and lacked operational independence, responding to directions from government ministers. The RUC and the Reserve Ulster Special Constabulary were militarised police forces due to the threat from the IRA. They had at their disposal the Special Powers Act, a sweeping piece of legislation which allowed arrests without warrant, internment without trial, unlimited search powers, and bans on meetings and publications. The Nationalist Party was the main political party in opposition to the Unionist governments. However, its elected members often protested by abstaining from the Northern Ireland Parliament, and many nationalists did not vote in parliamentary elections. Other early nationalist groups which campaigned against partition included the National League of the North, the Northern Council for Unity, and the Irish Anti-Partition League. The Unionist governments, and some Unionist-dominated local authorities, were accused of discriminating against the Catholic and Irish nationalist minority, especially over gerrymandering of electoral boundaries, the allocation of public housing, public sector employment, and policing. While some individual accusations were unfounded or exaggerated, there are enough proven cases to show a consistent and irrefutable pattern of deliberate discrimination against Catholics. Decades later, Unionist First Minister of Northern Ireland, David Trimble, said it had been a cold house for Catholics. In June 1940, to encourage the neutral Irish state to join with the Allies of World War II, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill indicated to the Dánaí Eamon de Valera that the United Kingdom would push for Irish unity, but believing that Churchill could not deliver, de Valera declined the offer. The British did not inform the government of Northern Ireland that they had made the offer to the Dublin government, and de Valera's rejection was not publicised until 1970. The Ireland Act 1949 gave the first legal guarantee that the region would not cease to be part of the United Kingdom without the consent of the Parliament of Northern Ireland. From 1956 to 1962, the Irish Republican Army carried out a limited guerrilla campaign in border areas of Northern Ireland, called the Border Campaign. It aimed to destabilize Northern Ireland and bring about an end to partition but failed. In 1965, Northern Ireland's Prime Minister Terence O'Neill met the Dánaí Sean Lemis. It was the first meeting between the two heads of government since partition. The Troubles, which started in the late 1960s, consisted of about 30 years of recurring acts of intense violence during which 3,254 people were killed with over 50,000 casualties. From 1969 to 2003 there were over 36,900 shooting incidents and over 16,200 bombings or attempted bombings associated with the Troubles. The conflict was caused by the disputed status of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom and the discrimination against the Irish nationalist minority by the dominant Unionist majority. From 1967 to 1972 the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association, which modelled itself on the U.S. civil rights movement, led a campaign of civil resistance to anti-Catholic discrimination in housing, employment, policing, and electoral procedures. The franchise for local government elections included only ratepayers and their spouses, and so excluded over a quarter of the electorate. While the majority of disenfranchised electors were Protestant, Catholics were overrepresented since they were poorer and had more adults still living in the family home. NICRA's campaign, seen by many Unionists as an Irish Republican front, and the violent reaction to it proved to be a precursor to a more violent period. As early as 1969, armed campaigns of paramilitary groups began, including the Provisional IRA campaign of 1969–1997, which was aimed at the end of British rule in Northern Ireland and the creation of a united Ireland, and the Ulster Volunteer Force, formed in 1966 in response to the perceived erosion of both the British character and Unionist domination of Northern Ireland. The state security forces, the British Army and the police, were also involved in the violence. The UK government's position is that its forces were neutral in the conflict, trying to uphold law and order in Northern Ireland and the right of the people of Northern Ireland to democratic self-determination. Republicans regarded the state forces as combatants in the conflict, pointing to the collusion between the state forces and the loyalist paramilitaries as proof of this. The Ballast investigation by the Police Ombudsman for Northern Ireland has confirmed that British forces, and in particular the RUC, did collude with loyalist paramilitaries, were involved in murder, and did obstruct the course of justice when such claims had been investigated, although the extent to which such collusion occurred is still disputed. As a consequence of the worsening security situation, the autonomous regional government for Northern Ireland was suspended in 1972. Alongside the violence, there was a political deadlock between the major political parties in Northern Ireland, including those who condemned the violence, over the future status of Northern Ireland and the form of government there should be within Northern Ireland. In 1973, Northern Ireland held a referendum to determine if it should remain in the United Kingdom, or be part of a united Ireland. The vote went heavily in favour of maintaining the status quo. Approximately 57.5% of the total electorate voted in support, but only 1% of Catholics voted following a boycott organised by the Social Democratic and Labour Party. Peace process. Politics. Background. The main political divide in Northern Ireland is between Unionists, who wish to see Northern Ireland continue as part of the United Kingdom, and Nationalists, who wish to see Northern Ireland unified with the Republic of Ireland, independent from the United Kingdom. These two opposing views are linked to deeper cultural divisions. Unionists are predominantly Ulster Protestant, descendants of mainly Scottish, English, and Huguenot settlers as well as Gaels who converted to one of the Protestant denominations. Nationalists are overwhelmingly Catholic and descend from the population predating the settlement, with the minority from the Scottish Highlands as well as some converts from Protestantism. Discrimination against nationalists under the Stormont government gave rise to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. While some Unionists argue that discrimination was not just due to religious or political bigotry, but also the result of more complex socio-economic, socio-political and geographical factors, its existence, and the manner in which nationalist anger at it was handled, were a major contributing factor to the Troubles. The political unrest went through its most violent phase between 1968 and 1994. In 2007, 36% of the population defined themselves as Unionist, 24% as Nationalist, and 40% defined themselves as neither. According to a 2015 opinion poll, 70% express a long-term preference of the maintenance of Northern Ireland's membership of the United Kingdom, while 14% express a preference for membership of a united Ireland. This discrepancy can be explained by the overwhelming preference among Protestants to remain a part of the UK, while Catholic preferences are spread across several solutions to the constitutional question, including remaining a part of the UK, a united Ireland, Northern Ireland becoming an independent state, and those who don't know. Official voting figures, which reflect views on the national question along with issues of the candidate, geography, personal loyalty, and historic voting patterns, show 54% of Northern Ireland voters vote for Unionist parties, 42% vote for nationalist parties, and 4% vote other. Opinion polls consistently show that the election results are not necessarily an indication of the electorate's stance regarding the constitutional status of Northern Ireland. Most of the population of Northern Ireland are at least nominally Christian, mostly Roman Catholic and Protestant denominations. Many voters are attracted to unionism's conservative policies, while other voters are instead attracted to the traditionally leftist Sinn Féin and SDLP and their respective party platforms for democratic socialism and social democracy. For the most part, Protestants feel a strong connection with Great Britain and wish for Northern Ireland to remain part of the United Kingdom. Many Catholics, however, generally aspire to a united Ireland or are less certain about how to solve the constitutional question. Protestants have a slight majority in Northern Ireland, according to the latest Northern Ireland census. The makeup of the Northern Ireland Assembly reflects the appeals of the various parties within the population. Of the 90 members of the Legislative Assembly, 37 are Unionists and 35 are Nationalists. Governance. Since 1998, Northern Ireland has had devolved government within the United Kingdom, presided over by the Northern Ireland Assembly and a cross-community government. The UK government and UK Parliament are responsible for reserved and accepted matters. Reserved matters comprise listed policy areas that Parliament may devolve to the Assembly sometime in the future. Accepted matters are never expected to be considered for devolution. On all other governmental matters, the executive together with the 90-member Assembly may legislate for and govern Northern Ireland. Devolution in Northern Ireland is dependent upon participation by members of the Northern Ireland Executive in the North/South Ministerial Council, which coordinates areas of cooperation between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Additionally, in recognition of the Irish government's special interest in Northern Ireland, the Government of Ireland and Government of the United Kingdom cooperate closely on non-devolved matters through the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference. Elections to the Northern Ireland Assembly are by single transferable vote with 5 members of the Legislative Assembly elected from each of 18 parliamentary constituencies. In addition, 18 representatives are elected to the lower house of the UK Parliament from the same constituencies using the first-past-the-post system. However, not all of those elected take their seats. Sinn Féin MPs, currently 7, refuse to take the oath to serve the King that is required before MPs are allowed to take their seats. In addition, the upper house of the UK Parliament, the House of Lords, currently has some 25 appointed members from Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland Office represents the UK government in Northern Ireland on reserved matters and represents Northern Ireland's interests within the UK government. Additionally, the Republic's government also has the right to put forward views and proposals on non-devolved matters about Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland Office is led by the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, who sits in the Cabinet of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland is a distinct legal jurisdiction, separate from the 2 other jurisdictions in the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland law developed from Irish law that existed before the partition of Ireland in 1921. Northern Ireland is a common law jurisdiction and its common law is similar to that in England and Wales. However, there are important differences in law and procedure between Northern Ireland and England and Wales. The body of statute law affecting Northern Ireland reflects the history of Northern Ireland, including acts of the Parliament of the United Kingdom, the Northern Ireland Assembly, the former Parliament of Northern Ireland and the Parliament of Ireland, along with some acts of the Parliament of England and of the Parliament of Great Britain that were extended to Ireland under Poyning's Law between 1494 and 1782. Span description/span. None. Alternative names. Many people inside and outside Northern Ireland use other names for Northern Ireland, depending on their point of view. Disagreement on names, and the reading of political symbolism into the use or non-use of a word, also attaches itself to some urban centers. The most notable example is whether Northern Ireland's second largest city should be called Derry or Londonderry. Choice of language and nomenclature in Northern Ireland often reveals the cultural, ethnic, and religious identity of the speaker. Those who do not belong to any group but lean towards one side often tend to use the language of that group. Supporters of unionism in the British media regularly call Northern Ireland Ulster. Many media outlets in the Republic use North of Ireland, as well as the 6 counties. The New York Times has also used the North. Government and cultural organizations in Northern Ireland often use the word Ulster in their title, for example, the University of Ulster, the Ulster Museum, the Ulster Orchestra, and BBC Radio Ulster. Although some news bulletins since the 1990s have opted to avoid all contentious terms and use the official name, Northern Ireland, the term the North remains commonly used by broadcast media in the Republic. Unionist, Nationalist, Other. Geography and climate. Northern Ireland was covered by an ice sheet for most of the last ice age and on numerous previous occasions, the legacy of which can be seen in the extensive coverage of drumlins in counties Fermanagh, Armagh, Antrim, and particularly Down. The centrepiece of Northern Ireland's geography is Lough Neagh, at 151 square miles, the largest freshwater lake both on the island of Ireland and in the British Isles. A second extensive lake system is centred on Lower and Upper Lough Erne in Fermanagh. The largest island of Northern Ireland is Rathlin, off the North Antrim coast. Strangford Lough is the largest inlet in the British Isles, covering 150 square kilometres. There are substantial uplands in the Sperrin Mountains with extensive gold deposits, Granite Mourne Mountains and Basalt Antrim Plateau, as well as smaller ranges in South Armagh and along the Fermanagh-Tyrone border. None of the hills are especially high, with Slieve Donad in the dramatic Mournes reaching 850 metres, Northern Ireland's highest point. Belfast's most prominent peak is Cave Hill. The volcanic activity which created the Antrim Plateau also formed the geometric pillars of the Giant's Causeway on the North Antrim coast. Also in North Antrim are the Carrick A Reed Rope Bridge, Mussenden Temple, and the Glens of Antrim. The lower and upper River Bann, River Foyle, and River Blackwater form extensive fertile lowlands, with excellent arable land also found in North and East Down, although much of the hill country is marginal and suitable largely for animal husbandry. The valley of the River Lagan is dominated by Belfast, whose metropolitan area includes over a third of the population of Northern Ireland, with heavy urbanisation and industrialisation along the Lagan Valley and both shores of Belfast Lough. The vast majority of Northern Ireland has a temperate maritime climate, rather wetter in the west than the east, although cloud cover is very common across the region. The weather is unpredictable at all times of the year, and although the seasons are distinct, they are considerably less pronounced than in interior Europe or the eastern seaboard of North America. Average daytime maximums in Belfast are 6.5 degrees Celsius in January and 17.5 degrees Celsius in July. The highest maximum temperature recorded was 31.4 degrees Celsius, registered in July 2021 at Armagh Observatory's weather station. The lowest minimum temperature recorded was 18.7 degrees C at Castledurg, County Tyrone on December 23, 2010. Northern Ireland is the least forested part of the United Kingdom and Ireland, and one of the least forested countries in Europe. Until the end of the Middle Ages, the land was heavily forested. Native species include deciduous trees such as oak, ash, hazel, birch, alder, willow, aspen, elm, rowan and hawthorn, as well as evergreen trees such Scots pine, yew, and holly. Today, only 8% of Northern Ireland is woodland, and most of this is non-native conifer plantations. Counties. Northern Ireland consists of 6 historic counties: County Antrim, County Armagh, County Down, County Fermanagh, County Londonderry, and County Tyrone. These counties are no longer used for local government purposes. Instead, there are 11 districts of Northern Ireland which have different geographical extents. These were created in 2015, replacing the 26 districts which previously existed. Although counties are no longer used for local governmental purposes, they remain a popular means of describing where places are. They are officially used while applying for an Irish passport, which requires one to state one's county of birth. The name of that county then appears in both Irish and English on the passport's information page, as opposed to the town or city of birth on the United Kingdom passport. The Gaelic Athletic Association still uses the counties as its primary means of organisation and fields representative teams of each GAA county. The original system of car registration numbers largely based on counties remains in use. In 2000, the telephone numbering system was restructured into an 8-digit scheme with the first digit approximately reflecting the county. The county boundaries still appear on Ordnance Survey of Northern Ireland maps and the Phillips Street atlases, among others. With their decline in official use, there is often confusion surrounding towns and cities which lie near county boundaries, such as Belfast and Lisbon, which are split between counties Down and Antrim. In March 2018, the Sunday Times published its list of best places to live in Britain, including the following places in Northern Ireland: Ballyhackamore near Belfast, Holywood, County Down, Newcastle, County Down, Portrush, County Antrim, Strangford, County Down. Cities and major towns. Economy. Northern Ireland has traditionally had an industrial economy, most notably in shipbuilding, rope manufacture, and textiles, but the heaviest industry has since been replaced by services, primarily the public sector. 70% of the economy's revenue comes from the service sector. Apart from the public sector, another important service sector is tourism, which rose to account for over 1% of the economy's revenue in 2004. Tourism has been a major growth area since the end of the Troubles. Key tourism attractions include the historic cities of Derry, Belfast, and Armagh and the many castles in Northern Ireland. The local economy has seen contraction during the Great Recession. The executive wishes to gain taxation powers from London, to align Northern Ireland's corporation tax rate with that of the Republic of Ireland. As in all of the UK, the economy of Northern Ireland was negatively impacted by the lockdowns and travel restrictions necessitated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The tourism and hospitality industry was particularly hard hit. These sectors have been mandated to close since December 26, 2020, with a very limited number of exceptions, and many restrictions were continuing into April 2021. Hotels and other accommodations, for example, closed apart from only for work-related stays. Some restrictions were expected to be loosened in mid-April, but tourism was expected to remain very limited. Transport. Northern Ireland has underdeveloped transport infrastructure, with most infrastructure concentrated around Greater Belfast, Greater Derry, and Craigavon. Northern Ireland is served by 3 airports: Belfast International near Antrim, George Best Belfast City integrated into the railway network at Sydenham in East Belfast, and City of Derry in County Londonderry. Major seaports at Larne and Belfast carry passengers and freight between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Passenger railways are operated by Northern Ireland Railways. With Norlin Airlann, Northern Ireland Railways CO operates in providing the joint enterprise service between Dublin Connolly and Lanyon Place. The whole of Ireland has a mainline railway network with a gauge of 5 feet 3 in, which is unique in Europe and has resulted in distinct rolling stock designs. The only preserved line of this gauge on the island is the Downpatrick and County Down Railway, which operates heritage steam and diesel locomotives. Main railway lines linking to and from Belfast Great Victoria Street Railway Station and Lanyon Place Railway Station are the Derry Line and the Portrush Branch, the Larne Line, the Bangor Line. The Portadown Line main motorways are M1 connecting Belfast to the south and west, ending in Dungannon. M2 connecting Belfast to the north. An unconnected section of the M2 also bypasses Ballymena. Additional short motorway spurs include M12 connecting the M1 to Portadown, M22 connecting the M2 to near Randallstown, M3 connecting the M1 and M2 in Belfast with the A2 dual carriageway to Bangor, M5 connecting Belfast to Newdonaby. The cross-border road connecting the ports of Larne in Northern Ireland and Rosslare Harbour in the Republic of Ireland is being upgraded as part of an EU-funded scheme. European Route E01 runs from Larne through the island of Ireland, Spain, and Portugal to Seville. Demographics. The population of Northern Ireland has risen yearly since 1978. The population at the time of the 2021 census was 1.9 million, having grown 5% over the previous decade. The population in 2011 was 1.8 million, a rise of 7.5% over the previous decade. The current population makes up 2.8% of the UK's population and 27% of the island of Ireland's population. The population density is 135 inhabitants/km2. As of the 2021 census, the population of Northern Ireland is almost entirely white. In 2021, 86.5% of the population were born in Northern Ireland, with 4.8% born in Great Britain, 2.1% born in the Republic of Ireland, and 6.5% born elsewhere. In 2021 the largest non-white ethnic groups were Black, Indian, and Chinese. In 2011, 88.8% of the population were born in Northern Ireland, 4.5% in Great Britain, and 2.9% in the Republic of Ireland. 4.3% were born elsewhere, triple the amount there were in 2001. Religion. At the 2021 census, 42.3% of the population identified as Roman Catholic, 37.3% as Protestant/other Christian, 1.3% as other religions, while 17.4% identified with no religion or did not state one. The biggest of the Protestant/other Christian denominations were the Presbyterian Church, the Church of Ireland and the Methodist Church. At the 2011 census, 41.5% of the population identified as Protestant/other Christian, 41% as Roman Catholic, 0.8% as other religions, while 17% identified with no religion or did not state one. In terms of background, at the 2021 census 45.7% of the population came from a Catholic background, 43.5% from a Protestant background, 1.5% from other religious backgrounds, and 5.6% from non-religious backgrounds. This was the first time since Northern Ireland's creation that there were more people from a Catholic background than Protestant. At the 2011 census, 48% came from a Protestant background, 45% from a Catholic background, 0.9% from other religious backgrounds, and 5.6% from non-religious backgrounds. In recent censuses, respondents gave their religious identity or religious upbringing as follows. Identity and citizenship. In Northern Ireland censuses, respondents can choose more than one national identity. In 2021, 42.8% identified as British, solely or along with other national identities. 33.3% identified as Irish, solely or along with other national identities. 31.5% identified as Northern Irish, solely or along with other national identities. The main national identities given in recent censuses were Several studies and surveys carried out between 1971 and 2006 have indicated that, in general, most Protestants in Northern Ireland see themselves primarily as British, whereas most Catholics see themselves primarily as Irish. This does not, however, account for the complex identities within Northern Ireland, given that many of the population regard themselves as Ulster or Northern Irish, either as a primary or secondary identity. A 2008 survey found that 57% of Protestants described themselves as British, while 32% identified as Northern Irish, 6% as Ulster, and 4% as Irish. Compared to a similar survey in 1998, this shows a fall in the percentage of Protestants identifying as British and Ulster and a rise in those identifying as Northern Irish. The 2008 survey found that 61% of Catholics described themselves as Irish, with 25% identifying as Northern Irish, 8% as British, and 1% as Ulster. These figures were largely unchanged from the 1998 results. People born in Northern Ireland are, with some exceptions, deemed by UK law to be citizens of the United Kingdom. They are also, with similar exceptions, entitled to be citizens of Ireland. This entitlement was reaffirmed in the 1998 Good Friday Agreement between the British and Irish governments, which provides that it is the birthright of all the people of Northern Ireland to identify themselves and be accepted as Irish or British, or both, as they may so choose, and accordingly confirm that their right to hold both British and Irish citizenship is accepted by both governments and would not be affected by any future change in the status of Northern Ireland. As a result of the agreement, the Constitution of the Republic of Ireland was amended. The current wording provides that people born in Northern Ireland are entitled to be Irish citizens on the same basis as people from any other part of the island. Neither government, however, extends its citizenship to all persons born in Northern Ireland. Both governments exclude some people born in Northern Ireland, in particular persons born without one parent who is a British or Irish citizen. The Irish restriction was given effect by the 27th Amendment to the Irish Constitution in 2004. The position in UK nationality law is that most of those born in Northern Ireland are UK nationals, whether or not they so choose. Renunciation of British citizenship requires the payment of a fee, currently £372. In recent censuses, residents said they held the following passports. Languages. English is spoken as a first language by 95.4% of the Northern Ireland population. It is the de facto official language, and the Administration of Justice Act 1737 prohibits the use of languages other than English in legal proceedings. Under the Good Friday Agreement, Irish and Ulster-Scots are recognised as part of the cultural wealth of Northern Ireland. Two all-island bodies for the promotion of these were created under the agreement, Foras na Gaelge, which promotes the Irish language, and the Ulster-Scots Agency, which promotes the Ulster-Scots dialect and culture. These operate separately under the aegis of the North/South Language Body, which reports to the North/South Ministerial Council. The UK government in 2001 ratified the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages. Irish was specified under Part 3 of the Charter, with a range of specific undertakings about education, translation of statutes, interaction with public authorities, the use of place names, media access, support for cultural activities, and other matters. A lower level of recognition was accorded to Ulster-Scots, under Part 2 of the Charter. English, Irish, Ulster-Scots. Sign languages. Culture. Northern Ireland shares both the culture of Ireland and the culture of the United Kingdom. Parades are a prominent feature of Northern Ireland society, more so than in the rest of Ireland or the United Kingdom. Most are held by Protestant fraternities such as the Orange Order, and Ulster Loyalist marching bands. Each summer, during the marching season, these groups have hundreds of parades, deck streets with British flags, bunting and specially made arches, and light large towering bonfires in the 11th night celebrations. The biggest parades are held on July 12. There is often tension when these activities take place near Catholic neighbourhoods, which sometimes leads to violence. Since the end of the Troubles, Northern Ireland has witnessed rising numbers of tourists. Attractions include cultural festivals, musical and artistic traditions, countryside and geographical sites of interest, public houses, welcoming hospitality, and sports. Since 1987, public houses have been allowed to open on Sundays, despite some opposition. The Ulster Cycle is a large body of prose and verse centering on the traditional heroes of the Iolade in what is now Eastern Ulster. This is one of the four major cycles of Irish mythology. The cycle centres on the reign of Conc Hobar mac Nessa, who is said to have been the king of Ulster around the 1st century. He ruled from Emain Macha, and had a fierce rivalry with Queen Medb and King Ailill of Connaught and their ally, Fergus mac Roich, former king of Ulster. The foremost hero of the cycle is Conchobar's nephew Cuchulainn, who features in the epic prose/poem Antain Bo Cuailnge. Symbols. Northern Ireland comprises a patchwork of communities whose national loyalties are represented in some areas by flags flown from flagpoles or lamp posts. The Union Jack and the former Northern Ireland flag are flown in many loyalist areas, and the tricolour, adopted by Republicans as the flag of Ireland in 1916, is flown in some Republican areas. Even curbstones in some areas are painted red, white, blue or green, white, orange, depending on whether local people express Unionist/Loyalist or Nationalist/Republican sympathies. The official flag is that of the state having sovereignty over the territory, i.e. the Union flag. The former Northern Ireland flag, also known as the Ulster Banner or Red Hand flag, is a banner derived from the coat of arms of the Government of Northern Ireland until 1972. Since 1972, it has had no official status. The Union flag and the Ulster Banner are used exclusively by Unionists. The UK flag's policy states that in Northern Ireland, the Ulster flag and the Cross of St. Patrick have no official status and, under the flag's regulations, are not permitted to be flown from government buildings. The Irish Rugby Football Union and the Church of Ireland have used the St. Patrick's Saltire or Cross of St. Patrick. This red saltire on a white field was used to represent Ireland in the flag of the United Kingdom. It is still used by some British Army regiments. Foreign flags are also found, such as the Palestinian flags in some nationalist areas and Israeli flags in some unionist areas. The United Kingdom national anthem of God Save the King is often played at state events in Northern Ireland. At the Commonwealth Games and some other sporting events, the Northern Ireland team uses the Ulster Banner as its flag, notwithstanding its lack of official status, and the Londonderry Air, which also has no official status, as its national anthem. The Northern Ireland national football team also uses the Ulster Banner as its flag but uses God Save the King as its anthem. Major Gaelic Athletic Association matches are opened by the national anthem of the Republic of Ireland, Amitran Nabh Fian, which is also used by most other All-Ireland sporting organisations. Since 1995, the Ireland Rugby Union team has used a specially commissioned song, Ireland's Call, as the team's anthem. The Irish national anthem is also played at Dublin home matches, being the anthem of the host country. Northern Irish murals have become well-known features of Northern Ireland, depicting past and present events and documenting peace and cultural diversity. Almost 2,000 murals have been documented in Northern Ireland since the 1970s. Sport. In Northern Ireland, sport is popular and important in the lives of many people. Sports tend to be organised on an all-Ireland basis, with a single team for the whole island. The most notable exception is association football, which has separate governing bodies for each jurisdiction. Field sports. Association football. Rugby union. Cricket. Gaelic games. Golf. Perhaps Northern Ireland's most notable successes in professional sport have come in golf. Northern Ireland has contributed more major champions in the modern era than any other European country, with 3 in the space of just 14 months, from the US Open in 2010 to the Open Championship in 2011. Notable golfers include Fred Daly, Ryder Cup players Ronan Rafferty and David Feherty, leading European Tour professionals David Jones, Michael Hoye and Gareth Mabon, as well as 3 recent major winners Graham McDowell, Rory McIlroy and Darren Clarke. Northern Ireland has also contributed several players to the Great Britain and Ireland Walker Cup team, including Alan Dunbar and Paul Cutler, who played on the victorious 2011 team in Scotland. Dunbar also won the Amateur Championship in 2012, at Royal Troon. The Golfing Union of Ireland, the governing body for men's and boys' amateur golf throughout Ireland and the oldest golfing union in the world, was founded in Belfast in 1891. Northern Ireland's golf courses include the Royal Belfast Golf Club, Royal Portrush Golf Club, which is the only course outside Great Britain to have hosted the Open Championship, and Royal County Down Golf Club. Snooker. Northern Ireland has produced 2 world snooker champions, Alex Higgins, who won the title in 1972 and 1982, and Dennis Taylor, who won in 1985. The highest-ranked Northern Ireland professional on the world circuit presently is Mark Allen from County Antrim. The sport is governed locally by the Northern Ireland Billiards and Snooker Association, who run regular ranking tournaments and competitions. Motor sport. Motorcycle racing. Motor racing. Rugby league. The Ireland national rugby league team has participated in the Emerging Nations Tournament, the Super League World Nines, the World Cup, European Nations Cup and Victory Cup. The Ireland A Rugby League team competes annually in the Amateur Four Nations competition and the St. Patrick's Day Challenge. Ice hockey. The Belfast Giants have competed in the Elite Ice Hockey League since the 2001 season and are the sole Northern Irish team in the league. The team's roster has featured Northern Irish-born players such as Mark Morrison, Graham Walton, and Gareth Roberts, among others. Geraldine Heaney, an Olympic gold medalist and one of the first women inducted into the IIHF Hall of Fame, competed internationally for Canada but was born in Northern Ireland. Owen Nolan, is a Canadian former professional ice hockey player born in Northern Ireland. He was drafted first overall in the 1990 NHL draft by the Quebec Nordiques. Professional wrestling. In 2007, after the closure of UCW, which was a wrestling promotion, PWU formed, standing for Pro Wrestling Ulster. The wrestling promotion features championships, former WWE superstars and local independent wrestlers. Events and IPPVs throughout Northern Ireland. Education. Unlike most areas of the United Kingdom, in the last year of primary school, many children sit entrance examinations for grammar schools. Integrated schools, which attempt to ensure a balance in enrollment between pupils of Protestant, Roman Catholic, and other faiths, are becoming increasingly popular, although Northern Ireland still has a primarily de facto religiously segregated education system. In the primary school sector, 40 schools are integrated schools and 32 are Gaels Coelina. The main universities in Northern Ireland are Queen's University Belfast and Ulster University, and the distance learning Open University, which has a regional office in Belfast. Wildlife. 356 species of marine algae have been recorded in the northeast of Ireland. As counties Londonderry, Antrim, and Down are the only 3 counties of Northern Ireland with a shoreline, this will apply to all of Northern Ireland. 77 species are considered rare, having been recorded rarely. Media and communications. The BBC has a division called BBC Northern Ireland with headquarters in Belfast and operates BBC One Northern Ireland and BBC Two Northern Ireland. As well as broadcasting standard UK-wide programmes, BBC NI produces local content, including a news breakout called BBC Newsline. The ITV franchise in Northern Ireland is UTV. The state-owned Channel 4 and the privately owned Channel 5 also broadcast in Northern Ireland. Access is also available to satellite and cable services. All Northern Ireland viewers must obtain a UK TV licence to watch live television transmissions or use BBC iPlayer. Root, the national broadcaster of the Republic of Ireland, is available over the air to most parts of Northern Ireland via reception overspill of the Republic's Say Orview service, or via satellite and cable. Since the digital TV switchover, Route 1, Route 2 and the Irish language channel TG4, are now available over the air on the UK's Freeview system from transmitters within Northern Ireland. Although they are transmitted in standard definition, a Freeview HD box or television is required for reception. As well as the standard UK-wide radio stations from the BBC, Northern Ireland is home to many local radio stations, such as Cool FM, Belfast City Beat, and Q102.9. The BBC has 2 regional radio stations which broadcast in Northern Ireland, BBC Radio Ulster and BBC Radio Foyle. Besides the UK and Irish national newspapers, there are 3 main regional newspapers published in Northern Ireland. These are the Belfast Telegraph, the Irish News and the Newsletter. According to the Audit Bureau of Circulations, the average daily circulation for these 3 titles in 2018 was. Northern Ireland uses the same telecommunications and postal services as the rest of the United Kingdom at standard domestic rates, and there are no mobile roaming charges between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. People in Northern Ireland who live close to the border with the Republic of Ireland may inadvertently switch over to the Irish mobile networks, causing international roaming fees to be applied. Calls from landlines in Northern Ireland to numbers in the Republic of Ireland are charged at the same rate as those to numbers in Great Britain, while landline numbers in Northern Ireland can similarly be called from the Republic of Ireland at domestic rates, using the 048 prefix. See also: List of Ulster-related topics. Outline of Northern Ireland. Outline of the United Kingdom. Notes.